Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. So today I'm going to measure pH in 3 of my tanks, and I only have 3 tanks using this digital pH meter. So this is just a cheap digital pH meter which I bought on eBay. I think it's Chinese made. Before I measure pH in my fish tanks, I usually check the meter in tap water. I know that my tap water is neutral. It's usually 7.0 pH. So before measuring pH in either of my tanks, I would measure pH of my tap water to make sure that the pH meter is correct and it's working properly. So in order to measure pH with this digital pH meter, you have to insert its lower part with electrode in water, about that much. It's better to have this part covered by water, but you shouldn't enter your pH meter in water above this line, above this part here. So we'll turn it on. Usually you have to move it a bit like this until it stabilizes, until the reading is stabilized. Yes, and we've got 7.1. So yeah, it's quite close to what it should be, and I'm quite sure right now that the pH meter is working correctly, and now I can use it to measure pH in my fish tanks. I switched off. So now I'm going to measure pH in my first tank. It's my display 250 liter tank. I will insert the pH meter like so. So you can see that only this part has to go into the water. This upper part should be outside. It should never be wet, because if it will be wet, all the stuff inside the pH meter will get wet and it's not going to show the correct measurements. I'll switch it on and I'll shake it a bit until the readings are stable. So it's 6.3. It goes down to 6.2. When the reading fluctuates between two values, it's usually either of these values that's correct. So I would think it's between 6.2 and 6.3, and it's stable at 6.3, so it should be 6.3. So I'll wash it now before I use it in my other tank. So now I will measure pH in my next tank. This is a 60 liter black water biotop tank with neon tethers. It usually has fairly low pH because it has lots of tannins in the water. I'm using here peat extract and alder cones as well as catappa leaf, so I expect the pH to be quite low. It is now at 5.4. It is usually about 5.5, 5.4. So yes, it's stable and it's 5.4. I can switch it off and I'll wash it again before we move to the next tank. So now I will take measurement in my last third tank. This is a 260 liter tank with angelfish. I'm not sure if you can see the measurement. It's currently at 4.4, which shouldn't be the correct measurement. Should be a bit higher. This tank always has really low pH. Yeah, it should be between 4.3 and 4.4. Well, very often you would get this kind of low pH if you have high ammonia or ammonium. I've checked ammonia and ammonium just earlier today, and they seem to be at 0, so this tank just has low pH. There is no ammonia or ammonium in there, so this is how it is. So I've used a few of these digital pH meters before, and they seem to be quite reliable. From time to time you have to replace the batteries, which are, in case of this pH meter, are in this upper part. You just have to remove this lid over there and you have to replace the battery. Sometimes you also have to calibrate them. In case of this particular pH meter, calibration is quite easy. There is this bolt over there, and they have provided this screwdriver for calibration. So the instructions are to insert it into distilled water and distilled water, and you should know the pH reading of that water. Then you would use the screwdriver to actually get your pH meter to the same pH reading as your water. In my case, I've been using my tap water because I know that my tap water has a stable pH of 7.0. So if the meter shows a different pH reading, I would use the screwdriver to fix the pH reading on the meter to fit with the pH of the water, which is 7.0 or 7.1. I usually fix it to 7.0, and I know then it's working correct. Well, in case of this particular pH meter, I've had it for about a year, and I've never had to calibrate it because it has been working correctly so far. I don't think that it needs to be calibrated for now, but it usually takes this kind of pH meters about a year to a year and a half before they need to be calibrated first time. But of course it depends on how often you're using them, and whether you take care of them properly. So after each use, you need to make sure that the electrode is dry, so you need to use some kind of a dry cloth to wipe the electrode. And electrode is this glass sink inside your pH meter. You have to take care that your electrode is dry before you close the lid, and you have to always keep it with the lid on so the electrode doesn't get any dust on it. So if you care about your pH meter and if you keep it in a decent condition, it should be working quite well, even if it's a quite basic and cheap pH meter. So this is it for this video. So please leave your comments in the comment section about what types of pH meters do you use, and until the next video.